SCP-5031 looks wicked. It's called Another Murder Monster, and the thumbnail on this thing looks crazy. I've seen this SCP referenced in other videos before, but never got the chance to react to it. Today we're going to check it out by SCP Exposed. Make sure to subscribe to him, guys, and let's get into this reaction.
It was 7 p.m. and the janitor was just beginning his night shift at the top secret government facility warehouse. He was sweeping the floors of the main building when he suddenly sensed someone standing behind him. The hairs on his neck stood up on end, and he suddenly felt very afraid.
Right into the action.
He turned around and saw a strange-looking creature before him.
It has no eyes.
I say before him, it was actually floating about half a meter from the ground, its body swaying back and forth. He didn't wait around to see what it wanted with him. He ran as fast as he could out of the building and all the way home. When he got home, he called his bosses to report what he had seen, but they just laughed it off. They told him he must have imagined it. It was a few hours later when he heard a knock at the door. His nerves were still on edge and he jumped at the sound. When he opened the door, he saw a smartly dressed man standing there. The man showed him his identification, and he was an agent with the Foundation. He asked the janitor if he could describe exactly what he had seen at the government facility. The agent then asked the janitor to take him to the warehouse. When they got there, they both entered the main building. A few seconds later, they both sensed something behind them. The agent pulled out a walkie-talkie and spoke into it.
Back up. Foundation personnel needed at warehouse number 9 to help contain an unknown entity.
But then his voice was cut off as the creature pounced. Welcome back to SCP Exposed. Before I go on, please make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any creepy SCP stories. Today, we bring you Keter class object SCP-5031. SCP-5031 is a non-sapient quasi-humanoid. It is a strange-shaped creature with an abnormally small head and virtually no visible neck. Its elongated torso measures 1.9 meters, and it has 3 lower arm limbs bracing out from each of its elbows. The bottom of its pelvis ends abruptly in a crescent-shaped protrusion made up of bone tissue, the lower edge of which is bladelike. The creature levitates approximately 0.5 meters above the ground. When directly observed, it will temporarily cease to exist until the viewer stops observing the space that it formerly occupied. However, traces of its existence, such as scratch marks or bloody trails, do continue to exist when SCP-5031 does not. Although video and photography equipment are unable to capture its appearance, observing its shadow does not cause it to cease existing. Therefore, we have been able to determine its physiological characteristics from its silhouette. While the creature has no nutritional needs, it will nevertheless hunt and consume any human or animal it encounters by using its pendulous lower body to down targets. SCP-5031 does not sleep and is incapable of expression or verbal communication. The creature has been contained in an airtight iron cell in Biosite 59 for more than 10 years. The structure has been checked on a bi-weekly basis for any imperfections. During the last 10 years, there has been no interaction with the creature. On the 14th of February 2018, senior researcher Stanley Huxtable took on the role of HCL supervisor for SCP-5031. He began corresponding with site director Yosef Mostafi in order to elucidate research progress. The following is a selection of relevant correspondences between the two.
I have no idea who wrote this, but there's a lot I'd like to say to them. I'm not a fan of abandoning a living creature inside a metal box for 10 years, no matter how pragmatic it may be.
Stanley Huxtable wrote about his initial impressions.
It's difficult to fathom that such things were considered the norm a decade ago. Have you ever heard something scream from behind 10 inches of iron for hours on end? When I do my redraft, remind me to add anomalous resistance to hoarseness somewhere in the description. I'd like to run some tests that require exposing SCP-5031 to certain stimuli.
On the 8th of March, Stanley Huxtable began round 1 of his testing with sounds. I installed speakers in the containment vestibule and played various albums of natural ambience and popular music. The creature's propensity for screaming worked as a convenient way to measure its stress levels. 100% would be considered its typical screaming over 48 hours, and 0% would be no screaming at all. Both volume and duration were recorded. Huxtable found that music served a slight decrease in stress levels in the creature. Further experiments are currently undergoing. On the 22nd of March, Huxtable began round 2 of testing. This was concerning the creature's ability to play. When he threw a softball into the enclosure, the creature sliced the ball in 2.
Right.
When he rolled a bowling ball into the enclosure, the creature scratched a couple of grooves into the ball, then rolled the ball around the enclosure with the blunt end of its tail for 20 minutes. Its stress levels remained less than 60% after play. Although it wasn't planned as part of the test, a bowling ball that was chipped and would no longer roll properly was rolled in. The creature's stress levels increased to more than 115%.
I see.
When a replacement bowling ball was provided, its stress levels fell back to around 40%.
What? That's crazy.
Finally, a basketball was tossed into the enclosure.
Pop it.
SCP-5031 picked it up and played with it. The creature's stress levels remained at less than 20% after play. After the completion of round 2 testing, Huxtable concluded that SCP-5031 had begun to use its hands to play with the basketball, possibly to avoid accidentally damaging it. Its motor skills were comparable to that of a toddler. The creature still preferred the bowling ball for kicking.
Sure.
On the 5th of April, round 3 testing on foods began.
Interesting.
SCP-5031 was given the choice between 2 potential food sources placed at opposite ends of the enclosure.
And
the results were as follows.
A human.
When a human corpse was offered together with a pig carcass, the creature chose the pig carcass.
Okay.
Between a pig carcass and a chicken carcass, it opted for the pig carcass.
Likes pork.
Next, a pig carcass was offered with a rotisserie chicken. It chose the rotisserie chicken. When a live chicken was put in the enclosure with a rotisserie chicken, it again opted for the rotisserie chicken.
It likes good food.
Finally, a roasted turkey was placed in it with a rotisserie chicken. SCP-5031 chose neither of them. It was presumed that its appetite was sated. The final conclusion drawn after round 3 of testing was that whilst it was true that the creature didn't necessarily need to eat, feeding it regularly had caused a marked decrease in average stress levels.
I mean, it is a sensation.
Stress reduction appeared to scale proportionally with the quality of food provided. Also noted was that the creature preferred to use its tail to pry and cut meat into bite-sized portions, rather than rip the meat into chunks with its teeth or hands.
It's domesticated, bro.
The round 4 tests on coexistence began on the 12th of April, the summary of which is as follows. In the first test, SCP-5031 was fed until sated. A live subject matter, the common chicken, was introduced to the enclosure. The creature observed the subject from a distance for several minutes and then rolled a bowling ball toward the subject at high speed.
It wanted to play.
The chicken was killed instantly. SCP-5031's stress levels rose immediately and drastically.
Wow!
In the second test, a live common chicken was once again introduced to the enclosure, but this time the bowling balls were removed. SCP-5031 was fed until sated. This time, the creature gently rolled the basketball toward the subject.
It knows better.
The ball hit the chicken lightly. The chicken responded with a small cry and moved away. SCP-5031 did not engage with the subject any further. In the third test, the creature was fed until sated. A live subject matter, Class D, was blindfolded and then introduced to the enclosure. It was instructed to sit and roll the basketball forward, then wait until it came back and roll it away again.
Look at
the subject and the creature successfully rolled the ball back and forth several times.
Now, this is
the creature eventually abandoned the activity and approached the subject. As per safety protocol, the subject removed their blindfold to terminate the activity. In Test 4, the creature was fed until sated. Once again, live subject matter Class D was introduced to the enclosure. This time, the subject was instructed to toss a tennis ball at the wall, let it ricochet behind them, then catch and repeat. The creature stood behind the subject and successfully engaged in a game of catch, mimicking the subject's action of letting the ball ricochet against the wall. The final conclusion was that SCP-5031's motor skills appeared to be rapidly improving. The round 5 tests on symbols began on the 16th of May. 5 LCD displays were fitted into the wall of SCP-5031's enclosure, each with a lit button and a food dispenser underneath it. In the first test, 2 stations were activated. On screen, one was displayed the image of a rock. Its button dispensed rocks. Screen 2 displayed the image of a rotisserie chicken. Its button dispensed pieces of chicken. The creature poked at the image of a chicken for a few minutes and eventually hit the button. Chicken was then dispensed until the creature was satisfied. In the second test, the screen display and the materials dispensed were swapped. The creature hit the button it had hit the previous day and received a rock.
Oh, you're gonna
It
be
then
mad.
went to the other screen and hit the button to dispense chicken. In the third test, the screen displays and materials dispensed were swapped back to their original positions and set to swap again at random intervals after the first distribution.
Okay.
SCP-5031 went directly to the button next to the image of a chicken. It experienced apparent confusion after the first mid-distribution swap, but quickly learned to watch the images. In Test 4, 3 more stations, screens, buttons, and dispensers were activated. 4 stations displayed the word rock and dispensed rocks. 1 station displayed the word chicken and dispensed chicken.
Well, that's it.
The arrangement was set to change randomly several times over the following days.
Okay.
Through trial and error, the creature determined which station dispensed chicken. The creature subsequently went to the station marked chicken whenever the displays were swapped. In the 5th test, only the letters chicken were displayed. Wooden blocks were positioned so that the creature could spell out the word. An hour passed and the creature still had not figured out how to dispense the chicken. It hit the wall with its tail
it's getting
in
mad.
anger.
Frustrated.
Then, once it realized
Like a
the wooden
toddler.
blocks could be pushed down, it successfully assembled the word chicken.
There you go.
Huxtable wrote to Yusef and told him that he had concluded that SCP-5031 could learn language.
He's intelligent.
On the 29th of August,
Very
the round
much
6
so.
tests on vocabulary began. Huxtable wrote that SCP-5031 had learned to use letter blocks to form many words, including tofu, beef, bread, Mozart, volume, silence, basketball, cat, dog, human, and alone. Huxtable concluded that through its increased vocabulary and human interaction, SCP-5031 had made much cognitive and physical progress. The round 7 testing on activities began on the 5th of October.
It was in
the first test, Huxtable introduced a table, some paper and crayons into the enclosure. The live subject, D52125, was instructed to demonstrate drawing for the creature. Eventually, the creature learned how to draw. Discernible subjects depicted in its artworks included D52125, the creature, a rotisserie chicken, a cat, and Huxtable himself. In the second test, a piano was introduced into the enclosure. The live subject D52125 was instructed to play chopsticks blindfolded and to invite the creature to play along. The subject had time to practice beforehand. The creature learned chopsticks in 2 days, though it appeared more interested in making its own original music, complete with vocals. These compositions might be considered crude by human standards. In the third test, a spice rack was introduced into the enclosure. The live subject, D52125, was instructed to demonstrate seasoning meats. The creature spent almost 3 straight days experimenting with different combinations of foods and spices. The creature assembled the words more with its letter blocks after running out of garlic powder. The final testing, round 8, was on cooking. Basic cooking facilities were installed in the enclosure, and a live subject was instructed to demonstrate the preparation of various recipes. As with all the previous rounds, the creature was soon able to copy everything the live subject was doing. However, it was also discovered that the creature had a severe peanut allergy. Huxtable said that it should be included in the revised containment procedures. He also noted that the creature was now a better chef than the average human, and it had begun to create its own recipes. D52125 had volunteered to taste test. The creature was given 2 months in which to prepare a 3-course meal to serve at the Biosite 59 cafeteria to personnel working over Thanksgiving. The creature successfully produced the meal, and whilst the personnel enjoyed their meal, it entertained them by playing its original composition, Piano Concerto for 6 Hands, live from its enclosure.
What an entertainer,
Personnel's response was overwhelmingly positive, and SCP-5031 stress levels were at 0%. Testing was successfully concluded, and revised documentation submitted for approval. What do you think of that SCP case? Please comment below.
I loved it, dude. This was such a really, really good SCP to learn about, man. I love this one. I hope y'all did too, guys. SCP Exposed. Make sure to check them out, as well as a couple other reaction videos that I've done. Thanks so much for watching. As always, this is Zueljin signing off. We'll see you next time.